there's somebody that can beat Ted Cruz in Texas, it's Colin Allred.
I'm so happy to be talking today with Symone Townsend, a co-host of The Weekend on MSNBC. Everyone talks about Texas every 4 years. Why are people paying attention to this Texas race specifically this year, as opposed to, we had a race in 2020 that people were less plugged into?
Let's just be very clear. There was, to your point, there was another Texas race, right? There was another Texas Senate race that came within points, a percentage point actually, of beating Ted Cruz, and that was Beto O'Rourke's campaign. States don't become competitive unless people do the work. And so the work over many cycles, just from the outside looking in, has been put in Texas, and 2020 was one of those key cycles. And so the work that Beto O'Rourke, his campaign did, the work that organizers within and strategists around the Texas Democratic Party apparatus have brought Texas to the point that we see right now. I mean, it also doesn't help that, Ted Cruz tried to lead the state in the middle of a natural disaster. All of these factors have aligned to make this race between Colin Allred and Senator Ted Cruz a very, very close race. I talked to my Republican friends down in Texas and Republican strategists months ago when Colin Allred first announced that he was going to run. And they said, if there's somebody that can beat Ted Cruz in Texas, it's Colin Allred. And fast forward now, as we're having this conversation, like literally on the cusp of election day, this is essentially a tied race.
The same week that we saw Donald Trump come in and endorse Ted Cruz, attack Colin Allred, we saw the Kamala Harris campaign make the announcement that they would be hosting this historic rally in Houston, Texas, a week before the election. Why would the Harris campaign decide to host a rally in the state of Texas? Why would they make the choice to host here instead of campaigning in other major swing states?
The vice president, she could win this race, right? I think the race, just like how this Senate race in Texas is tied, I would argue that it is a toss-up, if you will, at the presidential level. It is going to be all about turnout. If she wins, she's going to need a Senate and a House. Colin Allred is a real pickup opportunity for Democrats this cycle. Democrats are defending, this cycle they were defending 23 Senate seats. Really, I like to say 22 because West Virginia is not on the map. If even one of those seats that Democrats are defending falls, right? Whether we're talking about Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, John Tester in Montana, all places that are very competitive right now. And I think that those candidates could still come out on top, but these are very tough races. If one of those folks falls, you need another seat. We had Senator Gary Peters on our show The Weekend recently, and he has been very clear, and the Democrats I've talked to have been very clear that they believe Colin Allred is the pickup opportunity. They also think there's a pickup opportunity in Florida, but to my knowledge, given where the candidate herself has spent her time, Vice President Harris physically going to Texas, having a rally, talking about Colin Allred on the stage, Colin Allred standing on a Harris campaign stage, to me says that Democrats writ large across the board, from the presidential all the way down to the Senate, they are feeling very optimistic about Texas, and a little extra push, a little extra, a little boost could be the thing that makes a difference. So I think is that, but also, if Beyonce wants to endorse, have her come on down to Texas, and maybe that'll help the Democrats get a Senate seat. Texas could potentially be a Georgia down the line, right? Where Democrats won in 2020. Texas doesn't become Georgia without investment, without organizing time, and without resources. And the campaign has made clear that they're willing, at this point, to do that. I think it's very telling that Vice President Harris has physically gone to Texas and she hasn't gone to Florida. And Texas has been ground zero for many of the biggest issues that the vice president has made her campaign about. Issues of freedom and democracy, the abortion restrictions, ground zero for trampling on the freedom of women in this country. Hello, Texas.
I think the earned media aspect there of people talking about the vice president going into this state where historically Democrats have had a hard time putting it on the board. I want to contrast the rally that was held in Houston with the rally that Trump held at Madison Square Garden. I think that both of these were events where the campaigns had intentions of getting earned media, breaking out of the Beltway, out of the bubble, and Kamala Harris. The breakthrough there was these women on stage in Texas talking about their experiences, many of which have been in ads for the Harris campaign already, like Amanda Zurowski. And then you contrast that with the Trump Madison Square Garden rally, where the moment that ended up breaking through there was very racist remarks that were made by speakers there. So, what do you think for people who were outside of the Beltway, low propensity voters who may have seen moments from both of these rallies? How do you think that fares for each of these campaigns individually when it comes to these vote shares in these key swing states?
Well, I just think the moments coming out of the rallies weren't good. Weren't out of the rally at Madison Square Garden for former President Trump. They weren't great moments. The ones that got the most pickup is like Rudy Giuliani talking about claiming that Palestinian children are taught as young as the age of 2 to kill and hate people. It is the remarks from the comedian, derogatory comments about Puerto Ricans, about Black people, Haitian people specifically as well. Like it is just attacking people. You had Stephen Miller standing on the stage talking about, well, America is for Americans. What are we doing? You don't spend money because the campaign spent real money to, have this event in Madison Square Garden. You do not spend that kind of money in a state where no, Donald Trump is not going to win New York, but there are some very key House races happening. This election is just as much about Congress, the Senate, and the House as it is about the presidency. Every member of the House of Representatives is up for re-election. And in New York alone, there are 4 to 5 races that could determine the trajectory of the House. That's the difference between the Speaker Mike Johnson and the Speaker Hakeem Jeffries. I can confidently say the clips that have come out of the rally that former President Trump held didn't help those 4 to 5 seats in New York State because of the content and the rhetoric and the people that were on the stage prior to Donald Trump. It's a distraction. It's just something else for candidates to distance themselves from. Rick Scott is out here tweeting about the comments about Puerto Ricans from the rally, again trying to distance himself because he is trying to hold on to his seat, his Senate seat in Florida. The way we know that is because the surrogates that have gone out on TV afterwards, literally, Lee Zeldin, one of again, a former House member who ran for governor in New York last cycle, he was on television the day after that, and he was like, look, other networks are talking about what Donald Trump actually said. And people on the panel are like, okay, but can you just not disavow the terrible comments? All these other things do matter. For the vice president, in the rally that she held, I do think it was effective. Had not only those women on the stage, but literal doctors. She had doctors on the stage when she did a similar type rally in Michigan. So that and just the visceral storytelling that happened from a woman named Andrea, who the campaign put a very powerful ad out. Those are clips that have only had positive added value, right? Like Beyonce rarely says like more than 6 words to us. Okay. For Beyonce to stand on the stage and speak extemporaneously and say she was there as a mother, right? Speaking to mothers across the country, that to me is very powerful. Now, is Beyonce gonna win Kamala Harris the election? No. But it is one of the many things that could tip the balance. On the other side, Donald Trump, none of the speakers on the stage on his rally in Madison Square Garden added to his efforts, right? They only helped create more headaches and issues for him. And they got Kamala Harris some endorsements because it was only after those comments about Puerto Ricans that Bad Bunny, J-Lo, and even Mark Anthony endorsed her. So definitely what we would call an unforced error.
Yeah, and I think especially with the Puerto Rico comments, that has brought a lot of conversation up about the population of Latinos living in some of these major key swing states. We know from the election in 2018, from the midterms in 2020, several of these very important elections were decided from anywhere from half a point to a point or 2 points. So when we're talking about people actually getting out and voting, how much of a difference does it actually make for someone who, number one, lives in a swing state to get out and vote? But for people who may not necessarily live in a state that's seen as being on the map for Democrats, why is it still important for people to get out and vote regardless of what state that they live in this year?
You talk to people all the time, right, Olivia, and they say, oh, I just don't, my vote might not matter. I'm not in one of the 7 battleground states, right? And it's like, people, every single member of the House of Representatives is up for re-election this cycle. Every single member. So maybe your vote will not make the difference in whom is president of the United States of America, but your vote will make the difference in who controls the House and who controls the Senate and who are some of your state legislatures. I think if there's one thing, especially for folks in Texas, y'all know y'all's policy, Texas policy is made in the Texas state legislature. Here's a secret for folks out there. That's true all across this country. America's policy is made in state legislatures. And folks say, "Oh, I don't live in one of the seven battlegrounds. I don't know. My vote doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I vote or not." That's actually not true. It matters for those state rep folks. And for sure it matters for these ballot amendments. I'm thinking about people in Missouri. Missouri is not one of the seven, right? But there are competing amendments actually on the ballot in Missouri about reproductive freedom and reproductive rights. People in Missouri going out there and voting. They're choosing a new governor this year. I believe the governor is term limited, so they're choosing a new governor. The attorney general is on the ballot. I mean, we just talked about national stories about an execution that happened, right, in Missouri, and the Missouri State Supreme Court, the governor and the attorney general there, they declined to weigh in on behalf of the petitioner, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, in the conservative majority, the United States Supreme Court, declined to weigh in on behalf of a man who should not have been put to death. The own prosecutor in St. Louis, Wesley Bell, who is running, by the way, for Congress, said that there was a mistake made and they don't think he should be executed. All of who your elected officials are, they matter. Don't have the electoral college out here having you believe that there's really not a role for you to play in this election if you don't live in one of the seven battleground states. There's a role for everybody to play. And because I want people to vote, regardless of who you vote for, I want people to go to the polls and exercise their voice. But the people that don't want people to vote, those are people that understand the power of what happens at the ballot box. So people wouldn't be fighting so hard to, keep people from the ballot box, keep people from exercising the right that we have as Americans to a free and fair election by being able to cast our ballot for the candidate of our choosing, if it wasn't such a powerful thing to do. So I believe, and I know it doesn't feel this way oftentimes, Olivia, but I really, really do believe that the people have the power.
Speaking of power is the importance of the youth vote. Both presidential campaigns have made a very concerted effort to try to court young voters. The Harris campaign very much so targeting young women. The Trump campaign very much so targeting young men. How much of a difference are young voters going to make in this election cycle?
Young voters, I think, are going to be key here. I mean, I think young people get a bad rap when it comes to the ballot box, right? Because let's dispel the myths, people. Young people do vote. In the last three elections, I'm talking about the midterms, the 2022 midterms, the 2020 election, and the 2018 midterms, young people have made the difference. And in fact, the youngest voters, those are the Gen Z voters. Now, when I talk to Democratic strategists specifically and folks who are advising the Harris campaign, they actually believe that some of their best opportunity to run up the numbers in terms of turnout across the country is with the youngest voters, is with Gen Z voters. And so I think the youngest voters are definitely going to make a difference in this election. But so are the millennials like myself. I'm 34 years old. My first election was 2008. I turned 18 and I could vote. And I was very excited to, cast my ballot in what would come to what I knew was going to be a historic election. Now, the millennials, sometimes we can be a little pessimistic, okay? The millennials, we done seen a lot. But millennials are also going to be key in this election. And people talk about the suburbs and whatnot, and these suburban women. The oldest millennials this year are turning 44. So some of those suburban moms, they are millennials. Young people, we can and will make the difference in this election if we show up and vote. Okay. And to be clear, we are the people that have to live with the ramifications of what the president, Congress, our governors, our mayors, our state legislators are doing. If you hear nothing else, get out there and vote. Get out there and vote. You don't got to tell anybody who you voted for if you don't feel like telling anybody who you voted for, but do post your I voted sticker. There's nothing more American than that, maybe the World Series and football. So I just encourage people to get out there and Participate in the process because politics is going to happen whether you participate in it or not. And so the only way to change its effect on you is to actually participate in the process.
Symone Sander Townsend, host of The Weekend on MSNBC. Thank you for such a wonderful conversation.